All right, should be live. Let's do the regular testing and such. Just to be sure. Come on, regular test and such. Should be live. All right, there we go. All right, I'm satisfied with that. And I probably could open this. And all right, so now we begin. So yeah, I'll respond to some stupid comments, of course. I guess, you know, that's what people do. Rude and stupid. So I think the last video I made, the most important physics video ever, it's well described, and I plan on making a part 2 and 3, try to do it concisely and explain, relativity and, time dilation, that component of it anyway, and, do the electricity thing. And what's the other subject that's left open? But anyway, it doesn't really matter. But a couple other subjects that probably need a little bit of explaining also. But anyway, the basic theme is there. So I feel satisfied with that video for 17 minutes. Pretty good. Anyway, so I'll read some of the comments that just... It's an example of what you get as a reply, which is junk. Anyway. So we'll go to the comments. I think I need this, and I need this, I think. Yeah, there we go. All right. So again, just unaccountable troll says, Nero Tank. Thanks for these vids. I get really great neck exercise from continually shaking my head back and forth. Well, why don't you be a little more specific? What part don't you understand, or you think it's silly, or you could debunk easily? Why don't you explain what that would be? And on the contrary, I can't just sit here and just mock your response by just saying things like virtual photons. Oh yeah, that's why magnets repel, and that's why they attract, for exactly the same reason. A virtual photon did it. Yeah, a virtual photon in reality. Yeah. Yeah, Bugs Bunny character, in reality. Yeah, really. Bent space. Oh, it's not really bent space. No, in 3 dimensions, it's a constant vacuum cleaner of some sort of ether or something. I don't know. Some kind of anti-divergence. Dark matter. Oh, yeah, it's matter, but it isn't anything like matter except it makes convenient gravity. Wow. You have no unification theory, right? You got quantum mechanics saying new universes are created every time a photon hits anything. And then your other explanation for how the universe works is, well, it's bent and it's stopped. The nothing tells the something what to do. So I don't have to explain what this something's doing because I'll just blame it on the nothing. Those are your 2 theories. They're not even compatible. They don't even unify. And you're mocking me? Oh, come on. All right, great for a laugh too. Love it. Yes, so again, and that's the best you can do. So that's how you argue with somebody's theory, is you don't point out how they're wrong in any way whatsoever. You just go, I got neck exercise shaking my head. Great argument. Not. All right, so then Melissa, who frankly, we obviously have a, what did they call it in the movies? A failure to communicate. So a magnet is a proton and electron filter. Well, no, if that's what you want me to say. That's not exactly how I would describe it. Protons and electrons can create atoms that are polarized. That is, the atom has more positive force on one side than negative force on the other side. So it's imbalanced. You see, it has more negative, so it has a it has a sidedness. So atoms can do that. Anyway, so a proton-electron filter The entire magnet is a filter. Yes, the structure, once it's been magnetized. Collector generator. Nowhere in my video did I say anything about collecting or generating. So again, just more, you know, they just, what was so complicated about this drawing? I mean, what? You know, I mean, I talked about how the energy goes in and the same amount of energy comes out. You know, energy goes in, gravity mixed, and the gravity comes out segregated. Same amount of energy in, same amount out, nothing's collected. All right. The black things hit black and they reflect. The red things hit black and they migrate and come out the red end. Black thing hit the red thing, comes out the black end. Red thing hit, reflect. What's so complicated? It's a filter. It doesn't collect anything. All right. Collector generator. So again, nowhere in my, I said nothing about anything generating anything or collecting anything. It's just amazing. Of single phase photon. What's a single phase photon? What does this have to do with anything? Where did I say anything about a single phase photon? Where? I talked about the force of gravity. I said the force of gravity. Gravity goes in little bits of energy. All right, that have only one distinction. They're either electron source or proton source. They're either plus or minus. They're essentially charged. They go in and they come out in a different form, in something that's magnetized. Where is there any kind of single phase photon? I mean, it's just not my, I mean, I never said anything like that. So why are you trying to put those words in my mouth? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, maybe that's not your intent, but why do I have to use your jargon? I've never said anything like a single phase photon in my life. And electrons. Where did I even talk about an electron? Electrons are stuck in the magnet. There's no electrons flying out of the magnet. What? Where did you misunderstand? Where in this diagram did I draw an electron? Because I don't see it. I mean, you know, where's there an electron in here? The arrows are always the force, always represented as force. In every one of my drawings, an arrow means a bit moving the speed of light. Where's the electrons? Anyway, just so I'm going to delete your comment just because it implies I said something in my video I didn't say anything like electron filter, collector, or generator. These are phase. These are all words. I never said anything like that. So to ask this rhetorical question as if I said something like that is just misrepresenting what's in the video, because I didn't say anything like that. All right. Where's the evidence that these black-red forces, so again, they're not black-red. I gave you a choice, didn't I? I mean, I called it electron force and proton force. I said you can understand as just plus and minus charge, the actual charge that affects electrons and protons. Most people understand that electrons and protons are elements of material charge, that they carry charge. Well, the actual mechanism of charge, the actual thing that is charge, is the arrows I drew. All right, so you want to mock it by saying red and black. Yes, there's two kinds of charge, plus and minus. So you want to say minus energy and plus energy, or minus force and plus force. That would be fair. Electron force, proton force. That would be fair. But you just want to pretend. How else do I illustrate it? Do you want me to, instead of making it nice and easy to see by putting red and black, I should make all the arrows the same color and put plus and minus signs on them? I mean, do I really have to do that just because you're going to use it against me? You're just going to sit there and use rhetorical tricks because you're a lame ass? Anyway, what evidence? The evidence was in all the arguments I made. I mean, really. This explains gravity. I said those exact words. This force explains why the magnets repel as you move them closer. And it explains why when you turn them the other way, they're pushed together, they attract. It explains exactly why it happens mechanically. And then, as pointed out, it explains all of these other interactions that take place inside of atoms and protons and neutrons. And it explains what photons are. And it explains how they're all made out of the same thing. That's the evidence. The evidence is it fits the evidence. It fits, as I stated, exactly in the video, exact quote. Okay, it fits all the experimental evidence. It fits it. It matches what Maxwell's equations predict. That's evidence, retard. Okay, where's the evidence? So, and again, where's your evidence of a bent space? Where's your evidence of a virtual photon? Where's even your explanation for how the virtual photon works? How does it know to cause attraction, and how does it know to cause repulsion? Why don't you explain that? And then you can make little funny jokes and be casual and rude all you want once you've explained something. But you've explained nothing. That this mechanism exists at all. And again, so this doesn't demonstrate that there is apparently a pretty significant force. This is not a minor event, okay? It takes real energy. If I had to move the pen this way back and forth, it would require real energy to be consumed. This is real energy that happens when something falls and when something has to be lifted. That's real energy. And you don't have any accounting of it. And I am giving you an accounting of it. I'm explaining where the energy comes from. When two magnets push into each other really fast, and when they fly apart or create tremendous pressure you have to push them together, that's energy. You have no explanation for where the energy comes from. Zero. Conventional physics has zero explanation for where the energy of magnetism comes from. Nothing. The magnets don't get lighter, no fuel is burned, and yet something very energetic takes place. How does it happen? All right, that this mechanism exists at all. So again, I can't, you really don't understand what the problem in physics is, do you? I mean, the fundamental problem is that, just as I would point out, this force is the smallest thing in the universe. And the smallest things in the universe, you can't bounce something smaller off them to see what they're doing. So we'll never have a videotape of the little forces doing their bit, doing their thing. You can't see photons traveling somewhere, can you? You can only receive them by destroying them, by having them terminate in your retina. Okay, there's no other way to detect them. You have to have them hit something, like a photomultiplier or a photodiode. They have to hit something. They have to be destroyed to be seen. That's it. You can only see their destruction. You can't see any other part of their activity. And the same is true for the force that's moving magnets. It's the same little stuff moving the speed of light. So that's physics. I mean, that's the dilemma of physics, is to describe that environment that you'll never be able to actually see. So you have to draw it. You have to model it. That's your only choice. And what we're arguing here about is, what is a better model? A model that has no energy, is inconsistent in that, they're never going to make bent space fit with quantum mechanics because they're two different mechanisms for how the thing is working. It's like putting rockets on the Wright brothers balsa wood plane. Not going to work. I've given you a unified theory, a theory that does work. It does go from the smallest bits in the universe to the biggest bits in the universe. So that's the evidence. I can't prove what can't never be seen. I can only explain how it fits all the evidence. Asshole. All right, Ted. If you place two objects in a pressure cooker, are they gravitated towards each other? So what you won't see in any of the drawings I did is anything called a crooked line. They're all straight lines or angular bends. No lines that, flow in a direction, curve, or do any of that kind of stuff. So the problem in a pressure cooker, Ted, I think that was his name, is, you actually have a pretty good force, but, a straight line force of a bunch of infrared radiation that's banging around. But the problem is there's a bunch of little atoms, you see. And the little atoms go in all kinds of crazy directions. So if you have two things, the problem is the little atoms do take unstraight lines. So the pressure ends up filling all kinds of areas. So Mach gravity, if you're going to make a box or do it, if you're going to try to make Mach gravity, you have to try to use objects that maintain as much straight line integrity as possible. They move straight and only interact in very angular ways. Not in any kind of other kind of path. And so, basically, in a pressure cooker, you got lots of this force in between all these little atom bits, but they're very small, so they fill the spaces between objects. And for Mach gravity to work, the simple argument is it's a straight line force. See, so a straight line force can't get to certain areas. See, the straight lines always get blocked. It's going to wait for the straight line to get there. Straight line misses, you see. So areas are shaded where they don't get any impacts from anything because of the facts of straight lines. That's why there's shadows around people, it's because the light doesn't go around the corners. So the force has to keep as much of that straight line integrity as possible. So it will work with like BBs and some sort of light object because the BBs carry so much more force and they're big, and their size will prevent them from getting into small areas. So they'll basically travel pretty straight, and they won't have too many interactions in between the objects, so there'll still be a low pressure and they'll still move together. But anyway, you could have just looked up Mach gravity and you would have found out that this is physics, idiot. It's not something I need to prove. It's already been demonstrated that a straight line force creates the inverse square law. It's a fact, okay? It's not something I'm asserting. It's a physical fact of the universe that's already been proven. But you're obviously just an ignorant turd, so you couldn't be bothered knowing what you're talking about. You're just going to talk out of your ass. All right. So if you place two objects in a pressure cooker, are they gravitated towards each other? Frankly, if you heated the container from the outside, they would be. But anyway, dog. This sounds wacky AF for real. Fine. I'm just saying you're just obviously too ignorant for this subject. You don't understand that this is already something well established as the rules of physics. I mean, I don't need to prove it. It's already been proven. This is what straight line forces do. And again, you're really not understanding. It's a straight line force. That's what light is. That's what gravity is. That's what magnetism is. That's why it obeys the inverse square rules. That's why light obeys the inverse square law. It's because it doesn't do anything but straight line rays. Dumbass. All right. So this guy says, Crown Jewels, I totally get it, just can't confirm it. So again, how are you going to confirm it other than it fitting the evidence, and fitting the evidence better than the counter theory of bent space and virtual photons and dark matter and photons that read your mind and create multiverses. I don't know. Whatever. But it sits better in my mind than the current status quo. Well, it should do, frankly, I'm just saying, I think I've provided enough evidence that it should do more in your mind than sit better. It should be sitting a lot better than virtual photon as an answer. Shit. All right, the current status quo physics has to offer. All right, I don't even know what dankiest video of 2K. So you can't even draw out 0. You have to say 2K18. 2K18. Oh, that's just too fucking retarded. So thank you, but goodbye. I don't know what dankiest is. What the fuck that means. Awesome work and descriptions. Thanks. Well, there's a decent enough comment. All right, so we accomplished that task. So Bass Angler, who I have had some disagreements with in the past. OBS LOL. So what the fuck does that mean? I mean, I'm just going to delete it because it doesn't mean anything to me. So, yeah, try again. LOL. That doesn't mean anything to me either. So I'll remove that. If I have to remove 3 comments in a row, you're going to get blocked. So try to make a real comment, or you better be quiet. Jeez, asshole. You just come here to waste my time? I like wasting people's lives. Yeah, that's great. Let's have that written on your fucking useless, turdy, smelly, swamp-covered fucking tombstone. This asshole enjoyed wasting people's time. LOL. All right, so before we move on, well, I might as well move on to that, and then I'll see if I want to do the electricity thing. The electricity thing is interesting. So the thing I'm working on right now, the reason why I'm making this video instead of doing the part 2 video is, you know, it's sort of an interesting subject. So you have 2 conductors, and you put DC current through them, and it has to be a substantial amount of current, and you put it going in the same direction. Okay, so this is plus, and let's say this is minus. And strangely, these 2 conductors attract each other. Because you'd say, you know, sort of, let's say this conductor is imposing magnetism on this conductor, and this one can, you know, it's going to be in the same orientation. So the 2 conductors should be repelling each other, not attracting each other. But if I take that same wire and I just curl it, all right, and I put a curled wire next to a curled wire, okay, and this is plus, and this is plus, and this is minus, and minus, and more importantly, if I put a rod in here, let's say, these will decidedly repel each other, okay? I don't know what a good repel. These are attracting. So the current's still going in the same direction. You know, the current's going this way. Current's going this way. In both cases, oh fuck. You get triggered easily. LOL. I mean, you know, I'm sorry. I live on a planet of imbeciles. Why should I accept that? I mean, what? I should just sit here and say, oh, I love you imbeciles. Oh, you imbeciles are so much fun. You time-wasting douchebags are just so fucking entertaining. No. I'm sitting here pleading for somebody to make a rational comment. I mean, actually pleading for something like an argument that has some sort of balls. But you little testicle douchebags can't manage it. God damn. Anyway, drawing. All right, so as I was saying, Here's one. You suck. Okay, then fuck off forever. Goodbye. See you never. Jeez, that was really easy. Hide user. Okay, fuck off. But you keep blocking people who make an argument. What did he just make an argument? You can't back that up with a single shred of evidence. I don't block people for making an argument. I block people for wasting my time. If they made an argument, why don't you prove it? Why don't you post their argument instead of this drivel? Why don't you show me the argument that somebody got blocked for that was valid? Show me the one fucking argument that was valid that somebody got blocked for. Post it, asshole. If you can find one, I'll post it on my channel page. So go ahead, find it, and I'll put it right in the banner on my channel page. Oh, yes, bullshit. So just bullshit. More wasted time, right? No evidence. The proof is in every video you make. Big fucking lie. Jeez. I mean, it really isn't that hard. You know, you're sitting there in front of your typewriter, and all you have to do is type an argument. That is something where you say, there's a video that demonstrates blah, 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 and that sort of just makes it impossible that you could be correct. Or here's a video explaining how the Eddington experiment was done successfully, you know, by some sort of rational criteria. But you don't do any of that. You know, you're trolls, and you should get what you deserve. You talk out of your ass. You have no balls. You're incredibly unaccountable. You talk shit on other people's videos, yet you don't even make videos. I mean, you're just so fucking weak. You're such pussies. Little fucking pussies. All right. Back to the drawing again. Jeez. All right. So as I was saying, without the visual, which was annoying, they have two conductors. You put current through them going the same way, from plus to minus, let's just say. And if you put enough voltage through here, enough amperage, these two wires will attract. But it does take a significant amount of voltage. All right. Now, if you take two wires and you just curl them a little bit, and the current's going exactly the same way, those two wires will attract. I mean, repel. So they'll push away from each other. Don't know exactly how to draw that. They'll move out here. Yeah. So, you know, clearly a little bit of a contradiction there, in need of some explanation. So, yes, I'm attempting to derive an explanation because it is a little bit strange. But really, I think it just has to do with how the atoms are. How I'm looking at it is when electrons move, so you have protons and electrons in the atoms. Protons on the inside, electrons usually on the outside, so they're the ones going to be on the surface. And so the electrons are going to be moving. That is, they're going to change places at minimum. You know, they're going to get pushed into a new orbit. So this electron will pop over here, and that electron will pop over there, and the electrons will cascade. And when this cascading happens is when this material becomes magnetic. And the idea, I think, is just kind of obvious that what's really happening is that there's a rotation, you could sort of understand, of the atom. And so it's having one of those things called a magnetic moment. The magnetic moment is moving forward. So you could almost argue that there's a rotation of the electrons around the atoms as this is happening. And that rotation is what's creating the idea of this, you know, polarized atoms. So the atoms are becoming polarized, and even more so because these electrons are likely pushing out. So they're becoming more, the greater the distance you create between the proton and the electron, you could argue the more that atom becomes polarized, in the sense that obviously from when it's in this location, as I would argue it is, it's clearly, the distance is clearly creating a polar fact. And this magnet would be much smaller, and so therefore less significant as a polar event. Something like that. So anyway, so that's what I'm working on, but it's just not quite enough yet. It doesn't say enough about the process of why the movement of electrons makes the material magnetic. And you stop moving them, it's no longer magnetic. And then there's also the counter argument where the two conductors essentially can induce magnetism in a conductor or a piece of ferrous metal. So in a sense, the current's going through this wire, and this wire, or piece of material, has induced a magnetic field, in that it polarizes. Its atoms tend to start lining up, and in doing that, it becomes a weak but real magnet. And the weakness and strength of it depends on how much of that takes place. So obviously by coiling wires around things, you magnify the effect. It keeps bouncing back and forth through whatever's inside the coil. But anyway, it's a little complex also. I mean, obviously there's just lots of moving parts in how you arrange these coils in different ways, and it has different nuance. So there's a lot to, you have to be kind of careful in terms of drawing conclusions, because there could be some experiment or some phenomenon that, whoops, doesn't fit that one. So as soon as something doesn't fit, you gotta fix it. So anyway, that's part of the process. All right, so on to just a couple of cnps things. That stupid Chappelle Natural Philosophy Society. The Franklin Hu guy, who, like I said, I did tend to like, but it seems like he does have a fetish for bringing up idiotic subjects, that can't possibly just, kind of dead ground. But anyway, yeah, he does seem to, I wasn't too impressed. So they posted 2 videos, and the Bill guy, the religious creationist, they just keep letting him tell these preposterous stories about, how the National Aeronautics thing or whatever had 1 million electric cars, and because the cars weren't polluting, they discontinued the cars, and all this. And the town he lives in, they have cars running on water, and obviously there's no car that runs on water. It can run on hydrogen, but it can't run on water. And you have to make hydrogen. You have to consume energy to make hydrogen. Electric cars aren't green. They're some color of brown. They're only green in a smog environment. But outside of an environment where you're trying to move the smog somewhere else, they're not that green. It takes electricity to run them, and it takes fuel to make electricity. And clearly, yes, we've subsidized a bunch of solar and wind, but it's a tiny percentage still of the fuel we consume, and would be preposterously expensive if it was actually paid for by the customers using it. Anyway, if they actually were paying the full price. All right, so it is interesting on that subject of the solar, just because I was watching some of those videos by, Gee, who's the lecturer? I lecture online guy. Forgot his name. Sorry. Anyway, Dan was talking about the Earth's atmosphere and stuff, and I was surprised. I had this idea that about 1,000 watts hit the surface of the Earth, but it's really a lot less than that. 1,300 watts hits out in space, around the Earth. But a whole, 30% reflects off of whatever, the ozone, this, that, and the other thing. And then a certain percentage gets into the atmosphere, but still ends up radiating back into space, not down. And so when you really add it all up, you're really talking about something like 800 or 600 watts that actually gets to the surface, and that's on a sunny day. So solar panels are really doing pretty well when you consider that for a square yard, you could probably get 200 watts. So, they're getting 1/3 or 1/4 of all the available energy, which really isn't that bad. So, just pointing out. I mean, in terms of efficiency, they're not 100% efficient, but they're pretty efficient. But it's still a tiny amount of energy, so realistically. Tiny. All right. So okay. So, yeah, I won't bother playing the Chappelle videos. Number one, some of them are impossible to even listen to because they have a couple of foreign guys who have outrageous accents. You can't even tell what the hell they're saying. So, but anyway, and then that Bill guy who just tells these preposterous truther stories, conspiracy story after conspiracy story after conspiracy story. So it's just they're tainting their own organization with just horrible pseudoscience. So anyway, the Franklin Who guy, though, he did brought up a couple of subjects, and I was surprised that he would be fooled. So one of them was he analyzed, I don't know why he's got this bug up his ass, but he wants to somehow prove that the inverse square law isn't reliable, and that somehow the Earth is losing mass, or the sun is losing mass, or some other crap like that. And he uses an example satellite data from our man-made satellites and their orbits, and that's a huge mistake in my opinion, just because we kind of know that those satellites, most of them aren't high enough that they're in orbits that degrade. All of them are in degrading orbits because all of them are in still kind of a dirty environment around the Earth, so they're running into a lot of particles. And so slowly they're losing their velocity. So they're not sustained orbits. So their velocity isn't sustained. And so he's going based on this data he has about their cycle. Well, their cycle is degrading, so you should find it to be that it seems like the Earth is losing mass. It seems like it should almost be backwards. If the Earth was losing mass, then that means the orbit of the satellites would, if you had a degrading orbit, that would indicate a strengthening of gravity, not a weakening of gravity. Well, anyway, so maybe that argument doesn't even work. But I just thought it was just kind of a, I mean, realistically, he really thinks the mass of the Earth is changing? No, because of what satellites are doing, even though we have this, the moon is quite consistent, NASA's been doing all this stuff, you think they would have noticed some of this if this is a real issue. Somebody else would have brought it up. Yeah, I still think my point is valid. I just don't know how to make it valid mathematically. I mean, he's basically going by this time it takes something to orbit. And the amount of time it takes to orbit would keep increasing as the orbit degrades. Indicating, well, anyway, so it could fit. I just don't know. But anyway, it's not a consistent enough thing. even knowing what the exact weight of the satellites are in space. Well, the weight wouldn't matter. Velocity is the only thing that would matter. And distance, but they probably can't know the exact. Well, they probably must. It's a satellite communicating with it. Well, anyway, I just found it to be, a silly argument. But whatever. All right, moving on to the next subject, which was shit. Might have to go back to the video because I don't remember that one. So anyway, then they started with the environmental thing. So I might as well get to that one. I've already done this spiel, but I mean, it just seems so obvious to me. So anyway, there's some guy who wrote a book, not by heat, but by ice or something. Like somehow we're going to get an ice age is coming. And yes, ice ages have been periodic in history, but obviously the whole point is that we've radically changed the game. That we haven't not radically changed it. We've radically changed the game. We've cut down a bunch of the sinks, the rainforests. We've done so, and besides releasing all of the black shit in the ground. And so first, it seems like a huge denial to just go by some what happened in the past thing, when the whole point is the Industrial Revolution completely changes the environment. Half the oil that was in the ground, which is a ton of oil, we have burned a ton. And we burned a ton of carbon, other fuels. And we continue to do so in buckets of them. So in the Jurassic, back when the dinosaurs were first started to roam the earth, or when the forests first started getting thick, there wasn't any coal in the ground. There wasn't any oil in the ground. So a ton of carbon, and there wasn't any methane frozen anywhere. So it was all available to be in the atmosphere. It wasn't deep in the ground. Okay, none of the dinosaurs didn't dig holes in the ground and bring the carbon to the surface. The carbon was already here in the atmosphere, and they're the ones who sank it, okay, by dying, and the whole humidity thing and the water cycle and the bogs and all that crap, all that living matter turned into frozen or locked or sunk hydrocarbons. I mean, it's just obvious that's what happened. And so slowly the earth got cold. I mean, it makes perfect sense that that's what it would do. So, yeah, it's 10 degrees colder than it was in the Jurassic. And, 10 degrees is huge when you think about overall Earth temperature. And obviously, we're reversing that process. So what's the argument? I mean, the threat of an ice age, when we're basically putting ourselves hundreds of millions of years backward in time, seems like kind of a silly argument. Silly to me. Anyway, and so the other subject was, I really want to remember this one. Shit. Well, maybe we'll just play some of the video since no one's commenting. That's what I'll do. Let's see. I gotta get rid of this. And gotta get rid of this for temporarily, so I can see this, and subscriptions should be in here somewhere. I believe that's it. This is the second one. Well, you can listen to some of this. I haven't gone through all this one yet, so I might as well play some. I mean, the Bill guy is just outrageous. The storytelling. I'll let you play here some of that. Somewhere in here, he's just yammering on and on. You could play.
Scattered it all over the place. But no, used on the moon rover, which was made with public money and not allowed.
All right, so he says the moon rover had special batteries on it that could run a car for 400 miles. as far as I know, okay, there's no way that could be true, because the batteries that were on the Mercury probes that happened much later than the moon landing were just NiCad batteries. I mean, if NASA had some specially great battery, why would they put NiCad batteries on their Mercury probes? Why?
To be patented. They were able to make a car that would go 400.
All right, so 400 miles. All right, so he's saying that NASA has an unpatented, public domain battery technology that is so much better than lithium or NiCads or any other kind of battery. And no one on YouTube is making them or showing them or telling us about them. I've never seen a single video about whatever lunar rover batteries technology and how great it is and how you should put it in your car. Truther bullshit.
50 miles on one charge. And I remember I was working at the NOAA at the time, and NOAA's had a certain amount of cars in their motor pool, and they were all electric. And
so again, he says they had 1 million of these cars made by who knows who manufacturer. So some manufacturer made 1 million cars, 1 million electric cars back in whatever, 1941. It's just such a pile of crap. Let's just jump ahead a little bit, and he's probably still going on. Yeah.
By a law of statistics.
All right, so now this is the other guy. I don't know what his name is. This rhymes with Gary, something like Larry or Harry or something. And all he is a crank. I mean, just crank, crank, crank. So now he's arguing that somehow when you have a conversation about global warming, there's no scientific merit to it because it's politics or something. And somehow we can't tell the difference between evidence that sounds rational and evidence that sounds like bullshit. Sure we can. That's yes, thinking is work. Considering and balancing and all that. Yeah, it all takes a little bit of work. But that's the whole point. Science isn't easy. You got to do a little bit of work.
Well, I don't know if it's really that, but you can see charts where you can see glaciations happen, and it starts to looking like a sinusoidal curve. Then you can start making predictions about what happened.
Right. So I mean, these ice ages happen, as I understand, like every 10,000 years for the last whatever 100 or so thousand years. Not all that impressive amount of time. And they had a certain regularity. And that's clearly in a very stable environment where nothing's really happening. Human beings haven't started to release all that carbon. So again, it just seems kind of silly to sit there and point to what the trends were when the whole argument that I don't think can be denied is that we have substantially changed the environment. I mean, it's just not the same world. We have destroyed carbon sinks, the rainforest, a huge amount of the Earth's rainforest, like half. And besides that, we've done all kinds of crap to the ocean, which was another sink. And we've released a ton of that black crap that was buried in the ground. I mean, how do you take those facts and turn them into, well, let's just pay attention to what was happening before that happened? I'd say it'd be retarded not to pay attention to what we've changed. Anyway, moving on.
Find all these dinosaur bones, and they find them basically complete. And if that happened,
all right, so now he's talking like the dinosaurs were flash frozen or something. And this argument I thought was so dumb. I'm just like, he couldn't be this stupid. I mean, he doesn't even know how fossils are usually made. Fossils are usually made because of a catastrophic event like a flood. Okay, so like you see it in Africa, the big flood comes and the wildebeests are trying to run across the river and they get swept down the river. And what happens is a ton of those carcasses get buried under a ton of sediment. So they don't rot in any kind of normal way. There's no animals tearing them to pieces. There's none of that crap. They slowly decompose in a cold environment, blah, blah, blah. And the other stuff is like Pompeii, another example, where a volcano erupts, a big giant pile of ash falls on everything and coats it. And so, yes, no animals get to it. Nothing gets torn up. It's essentially sanitized by the toxic gases and all the other crap. And so it doesn't decompose in some fast maggot way. It decomposes in a completely different way. I mean, he should know that.
Now, how can that happen? Because during the time, there were all kinds of scavengers, and they would have immediately, if they saw any dead animal, would have immediately disassembled it and scattered it all.
Right. So a tiny percentage of the organisms that are alive that die are fossilized. I mean, it's 1 in a billion, maybe. I mean, it's a tiny number that have that circumstance where they fall in the quicksand or whatever the thing is, and where the environment is sterile, and then it becomes alkaline or acid or whatever the right thing is, and then it mineralizes and turns their bones, the minerals seep into the bones and essentially turn them into a kind of rock. It's a tiny percentage, and obviously it's quite logical to associate it with events that would be catastrophic, not regular. Regular events aren't going to create that circumstance. You have to be in a flood, or you have to be in a tsunami, or you have to be in a volcano. Something dramatic has to happen.
All over the place. But now we find these animals essentially.
He was talking about how they found mammoths that are frozen standing up and that people ate them. I mean, that sounds a little bit like urban legend BS.
Act all over the world, which is part of his evidence that this happened.
So if that's in his book as part of his evidence, then it's a pretty ignorant argument. I mean, he wrote a book without thinking very hard about, maybe I should know something about how fossils are formed before I start making declarations about how the dinosaurs couldn't be fossilized in one piece. Of course they could. The only way you can possibly be a fossil is likely not to be a victim of predators. I mean, some bones they find that are fossilized that have like teeth marks on them or something, and those are bones that were covered by a volcano or buried in a flood.
Like really suddenly. So I think part of the thing here,
So they were arguing also against the asteroid theory for the dinosaurs being killed. And I don't think it's the complete answer, but I think it's kind of obvious. But they were talking about volcanoes. And I said, well, what would be a great way to cause added volcanic activity? Well, I think a pretty great way is to have a giant asteroid hit. That's probably one way to jiggle all of those little magma bombs just waiting to go off, and they're going to shoot their load. That little jiggle is all they need.
He autographed my book here. I guess if you buy it, you can get an autograph. It says, good luck during the coming ice age, because apparently we're going to need it. And he warns things like, be prepared for sudden ice age. I mean, literally, like, keep snowshoes in your garage kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, there's absolutely no reason for it to be a sudden ice age. So that's just, in my opinion, just crazy talk. I mean, you could argue that if you have a nuclear winter, well, that's reason. Some catastrophic event that takes place, where you do get a bunch of particulates in the atmosphere. But the catch to those is they're going to have, it's this whole thing of trying to measure, tiny scale events on this large scale. I mean, in the short term, you get cold, and then when all the real heavy particles fall back out in a month, then you're going to get hot, because then you're going to start greenhouse gassing. So, I mean, it's a lot more complicated. So probably what killed the dinosaurs was the fact that the environment became too unstable for big organisms. Too many cold nights. It wasn't like it had to be cold forever. It just had to be a few too many nights. Big things don't do well in the cold.
Because it could come very quickly.
Big reptiles, anyway. Obviously, the mammoths did okay.
You know, there's another explanation for this data he's pointing out, which is propagated quite widely throughout the world, and that is
Noah.
it's due to the worldwide flood.
There we go. So bringing up religion, they're not supposed to do religion. I mean, they keep letting this creationist kook bring up his stupid. There is another theory, totally made up, for which there's no evidence. You know, complete garbage. But yes, let's talk about it. No, let's not. Let's see if they shut him up.
Well, he does mention that.
So another piece of crap against this crappy book, right? So it sounds like it was written by a Bill creationist.
Although he kind of mentions it in terms of what happens when the glaciation periods end. Apparently, he notes that when the glaciation period.
See, both of these syndromes feed each other. So you can sort of understand is that, if the world gets colder, that means it gets less humid. I mean, the atmosphere can hold less water. And that means the vapor is actually a greenhouse gas. So that's one of the greenhouse gases that diminishes as things get colder. So, it kind of cycles. And then there's a point where the cycle goes too far, and then it goes the other way. So it's a pendulum swing kind of thing. I think that's the rational way to perceive it. And we're obviously stopped at the pendulum and are pushing it pretty hard in one direction.
And like gigantic lakes form behind these ice dams. And there's evidence that when these ice dams break, that it causes just flooding of biblical proportions in the rest of the continent. So, and he kind of, I don't know that he goes back to the biblical flooding story, but he certainly indicates that gigantic events like that have occurred, and it's really the only way to explain, certain features that are found.
Right, and I'm supposed to trust him after he made an argument that somehow dinosaurs can't get fossilized because predators would chew their bones up. I mean, come on.
In places that they're only consistent with a gigantic flood, like something like the size of Lake Michigan emptying out.
Well, most of the water that was involved in the flood was under the continent, and it came up under great pressure and went high into the atmosphere and froze before it came down.
So he's making up stories now that aren't even in the Bible. So now he's rewriting God's story for him and saying, oh, God, you left a few things out. Remember the frozen towers of water? Oh, fuck.
And it covered all of the earth. And so even when we go and look in deserts today, we find evidence of glacial activity in the desert. And
again, irrelevant, but whatever.
And it's been.
I mean, you find evidence of all kinds of geological history. I mean, you can go to Pikes Peak. I mean, obviously, a lot of ground was eroded, is gone, is disappeared, and this hard piece of rock is sticking way up in the air, and everything that used to be next to it is gone. Yes, some very incredible things have taken place in the past, either very slowly or very quickly. But obviously they've happened. I mean, I've seen the Grand Canyon. Big freaking ditch.
It's been a desert for as long as recorded history.
Recorded history is kind of irrelevant, okay? I mean, even that statement, longer than recorded history. For all of recorded history. Recorded history is only like 5,000 years old. You know, shit. Geologic history is written in rock, and you know, it goes way back.
And so, for instance, the Sahara Desert is one of those that has a lot of glacial activity. There's no glaciers there today, haven't been there for thousands of years, but there were some.
Yes, there's places that were not a desert 100 years ago that we humans have turned into a desert. So again, desert is just totally irrelevant to this. What was a desert? What wasn't a desert? There's dinosaurs under the desert. Do you think dinosaurs were living in a desert? No. When the dinosaurs lived, it wasn't a desert. You think dinosaurs were living under the Gulf of Mexico?
At one time, because we could see the evidence of the glacial activity. And because the water is coming out from under the continents, bringing lots of minerals, including radioactive, to the surface. And so your iridium is coming from that. And
I'm just talking right out of his ass. I mean, let's just make up absolute bullshit. So whatever, a bunch of water came out, covered all of the continents, and then somehow some of it went away, a big pile of it. And then the Rocky Mountains went shooting up into the air by some sort of magic. Whatever. Crazy fucks.
And it's a lot warmer now. But we're talking about even thousands of years ago, there were no glaciers on most of these continents. And we have to come up with some reason why we don't. And I think that reason is the expansion of the Earth over time causes it to get warmer. And so what we had originally after something like the flood.
So this expanding Earth thing just makes absolutely no sense, because if the Earth gets bigger and more massive, then you have to explain how a less massive Earth held the atmosphere and how it had enough density for anything to breathe. If it doesn't gain mass, then you have to explain how it was compressed and it relaxed somehow. I mean, what happened? Less gravity all of a sudden or something? And what happened to the moon? And what happened to all the other stuff that might have been around the Earth? And obviously this big change would mean that stuff that was in stable places wasn't stable anymore.
It slowly melted. And the oceans are not flooding the world as much as you might expect, because the Earth is still expanding. And by the way, the GPS data shows that it's still undergoing a three-dimensional expansion.
Yeah, so where does he get that from? The GPS data shows the Earth is expanding. Just make it up. Just talk shit. All right, we're supposed to, what's the point? He makes, 40 bizarre statements, extraordinary claims. It proves none of them, and we're supposed to what? Research them all to point out how they're shit?
Well, this guy, he's got quite a bit of, he will occasionally show some charts. So this is a chart he has of the ocean sea level. Now, the thing he'll be showing here is that basically our current sea level, present day, that's that bottom line there, is almost an historic low. That's basically the sea level has been much higher in the past. Generally speaking, much higher.
That's because the Earth is expanding.
Well, again, where do you get this data from? Again, just we have no sourcing, so yeah, it's more horse shit. I mean, it seems to some extent, obviously, pieces of the territory have sunk and pieces have risen. But I mean, to say that, again, if there's oil under the Gulf of Mexico, And the Gulf of Mexico isn't all that deep, but I'm just saying it seems kind of obvious that there must have been less ocean water, not more, but whatever.
So there isn't enough water to fill the oceans as deep as they used to be.
But it does go up and down, and I don't think that the Earth is going up and down in volume, even by that. So I'm not quite sure that that really supports that.
Well, but you see, you have more melting occurring. So we used to have lots of glaciers in the United States in our history, but they're melting, and so there are more waters going out to the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, glaciers are not a surprise. I mean, every hill and valley here was created by glaciers. I mean, that's really old news. The fact that there was glaciers, that's why the South is flat. That's why the North is lumpy. I mean, come on. That's really old news.
So it depends on when you measure it and how quickly the glaciers melt when there's a certain level of expansion. And the expansion is erratic. You know, what we call earthquakes are participating in that expansion. The earthquakes all occur along the cracks between the continents as far as expansion is concerned. And so when we have major earthquakes, the Earth is getting a little bit larger, and that will cause temporarily.
Whatever, just made up bullshit. Let's jump ahead. Horrible. I mean, the whole point of having an organization is do some truth checking, some fact checking, to be able to provide people who might be viewing this crap with some editorial standards. But just to say, we're just going to let anybody say anything they want, any kind of crap is fine.
Seems to need these two things, which is rotation and a thick atmosphere to have a strong magnetic field. So that's another component to think about. Another piece of evidence comes from these two charts that I found. And this is kind of a chart of the motion of the magnetic field around the Earth. And there definitely seem to be some patterns you can see around here, like around the Pacific Ocean. There seems to be a circular circulation around there.
Oh, this is probably just more crap. I mean, it probably has to do with how much ferrous material is in certain regions, and the density of the material in different locations in the Earth, rather that part becomes sympathetically magnetic. And
you can't see it there, but there's other circular rotations that have to do with the continents, the placement of the continents. And then if you compare that against another chart of, say, surface winds, you can kind of see similar patterns. Like, over the Pacific, we have a circulation. Over the Atlantic, we have a circulation.
It's like flat Earth crap.
To do that, because he's not going to discover truth.
Oh, this is the website about. Top of this website here.
Yeah.
But Bill, do you think truth is really what people want, or is it just an excuse that is used to enforce belief so that the political people can achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve?
If people are stupid, then they'll believe stupid shit. There's nothing else there's no other weapon to fight here, right? I mean, it's idiocracy. That's a big problem. Now, all you can do is try to plead with the idiots to control their, impulse to think they're, authorities on every subject, and that they've done all the research necessary, and they can tell us that the world is flat, or that fucking God flooded the earth, or whatever their bullshit is. And certainly people who have some sort of reasoning skills understand that one of the first things you want to do when you're looking for the truth is not fall for a lie or fall for bullshit. So you want to first do your bullshit detecting, and you want to be a little bit cautious about how quickly you jump to a conclusion. I mean, that's kind of a rush to judgment. I mean, that's kind of like a little goodism statement saying, don't rush to judgment. If you have time, take the time to make sure, to, you know, test your theory. Now, people don't want to do any of that, clearly. So, you know, that's the world we live in. Most of the people are lazy, arrogant, obnoxious, shit-talking fucktards. It's a fact.
Well, I'm writing a series of papers at the moment on what I call the regression of modern science. And I'm not the only person that has noticed that modern...
Well, I think I'll write a series of papers on the progression of pseudo-fucktard, make up a bunch of shitty, silly truther stories about how they're hiding all of your Poincaré books. All those evil librarians.
In science, the major theories are all false after a certain period of time, about the mid-1800s. And what I'm finding is from circumstantial evidence, it appears that the scientific method was changed from the logical, empirical method of people like Isaac Newton to the existential scientific method, which largely removed the role of logic, particularly in the falsification.
Just more crap, just made up shit, blah, 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 psychobabble nonsense. I mean, clearly, the New York Times publishing a headline that says Einstein right, based on an experiment that was garbage, that's kind of a problem, right? So, I mean, that's not a very good scientific method when you declare somebody right and then everybody has to believe he's right and everybody has to make him right when, you know, he's not right. I mean, they're not doing much fact checking. They're jumping to conclusions. They're jumping the evidence. Yeah, that's something they didn't do in Newton's time because all the other guys didn't go for all this shit. They all didn't go to the same high school and the same university where they were all taught the same bullshit. So they all had kind of more of a dissident environment. And so when you made a claim like Newton, there was lots of people willing to say, you're full of shit, that's wrong, I got a better idea, blah, 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 blah. And there isn't any of that anymore.
Of theories based on bad assumptions that are known to be false. And so what I've done is
Yeah, why don't you list those and just spare us from your alternative wacky theory, and why don't you just list their mistakes?
Analyzed what is wrong with each of those theories, shown how a universal electrodynamic force, can explain that data.
Right, so shown how your pseudoscience, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you didn't really show theirs wrong. You just are going to try to replace it with your bibble babble.
In a different way, better than the current theories do. And then I point out that all of these false theories that are in modern science have one thing in common, and that is they all attempt to refute something revealed in the Bible, in the book of Genesis.
Here we go, in the book of Genesis. So it just, you know, this really isn't going to work. You know, if you, you know, I'm just saying, if you want to try to have some sort of science room, you just can't do it with a creationist because they're just, you know, it's just such a turnoff to have to tolerate listening to some asshole talk about Genesis in a discussion about reality. You know, it's worse than politics. You know, it's worse than somebody bringing up Trump or something or some other crap in the middle of a science conversation. It's just totally destructive to the function. Just giving you some fair advice. Not that you're paying any attention. But, I mean, I'm going to stop watching this shit if I have to hear that crap.
Be proved wrong, and that protects them. So that's kind of understandable. I mean, what else can you do? You can't admit that you're wrong.
Well, how are you going to make?
I don't think they think they're wrong. So this is part of this more of this conspiracy theory thing where all of these whack jobs think they're wrong. No, they love the idea of this whole, they just glowingly talk about the universe and black holes and singularities and magical stuff and blah, blah, gravity waves, blah, blah. They love all that horse shit.
Progress if you never admit you're wrong and look for a correct answer.
Yeah, but you know, they've created science as being, because scientists say so, it's right, and you must believe it. Because
it's not true. I mean, we're still arguing about evolution, which is retarded. So clearly, all you can do is make arguments. We've been making arguments for 250 years now, right? About Darwin. I mean, it's over 200 years anyway. And we still have to argue it. Even though the evidence is overwhelming that evolution is a truth, we still have to argue it with most of the human race. So again, this is about the average human being a fucking idiot who thinks they're qualified to make scientific determinations and judgments when they haven't done any of the work to really understand a single process or a single fact.
Scientists say so, but if scientists are ever found to be wrong in something massively significant, like, you know, admitting that the Big Bang Theory was incorrect or admitting that special relativity was wrong, then that means that
I don't even think those are particularly good examples, you know, obviously, just because they're iffy already. I mean, there is some question raised in both of those theories. So the one you have to kill is, you know, wave theory, for example, I think would be a much better target. I mean, a much better win to end this nonsense of duality and, you know, having a virtual photon and, you know, dark matter bullshit. That stuff's a lot more glaringly stupid.
what scientists say isn't true just because they say so. They could be wrong, and they're not necessarily always right about everything, which they claim to. And so their credibility gets demolished, and they can't have that, can they?
Yeah. Well,
you know they can't.
There's
well, getting back to the book here. So chapter 6.
So again, just more conspiracy theory stuff. Again, the problem is that most of the stuff being argued over is really tiny stuff. We don't have videotapes. The evidence is weak. All right, there isn't any strong, decisive evidence. So you have to model with all these little things that you have to match, a bunch of little things that you have to match. And so physics took a huge advantage. I mean, they have a huge advantage in the fact that they've accepted non-unification. So in a sense, they've been able to say, we're just going to cut half the universe as this and half the universe as that. So now they can get rid of a whole bunch of contradictions and incompatibilities because they just say quantum mechanics only applies to these small things and relativity only applies to these big things, you know, which is horse shit.
His chapter 6 is on continental drift. I think, you know, we can have our disagreements as to why that happens. But his main thesis is that it does happen. That these plates are being driven apart. And one of his hypotheses here is that he says, like, north-seeking protons drive the plates. But basically, this is an electromagnetic effect that's being driven by basically magnetic repulsion. And one of his
whatever. I mean, the Earth is spinning, you know, in space, going, you know, very fast around a sun. There's other things torquing on it, and oh, we're surprised that some of the shit moves around. No, I'm not surprised. That's why they have seat belts in cars, because you move around in them.
This is here. And then he notes things like, you know, earthquake lights, that a lot of earthquake activity does seem to be related to electromagnetic.
Yeah, whatever.
But the
earthquake lights are just quartz being crushed. It's nothing surprising. It causes electricity.
The freshwater species seem to be relatively unaffected. So he's saying that that basically all the oceans, because they started to basically boil due to all this volcanic activity, that pretty much killed off everything in the oceans. And it explains why is it the freshwater species were relatively untouched, because they weren't being boiled to death. And
yes, well, whatever. So this is just completely idiotic, in my opinion. I mean, the amount of energy we've got to boil the oceans, it's an insane amount of energy required to do that. Oh, God.
weather causes the reversal in the magnetic field, and you get a sudden glaciation due to all these volcanoes suddenly spewing out ash and darkening the world like a nuclear.
Yeah, whatever. All right, enough of this crap. This crap. Absolute crap. Crap. Shouldn't even have played it. It's such bad crap. All right, so enough of that. I guess we don't need that anymore, and we'll just get out of here. So, not a very productive video, I must concede.
This ain't.
Okay, that was way too loud. Way too loud. All right, let's see what we got in here. 7 viewers, pretty poor. All right, so we'll just get the fuck out, I guess. No, I just make regular videos. No point in doing this low resolution thing when there's so little rational participation. It really is pointless. It is. Can't talk physics if there's no one else who wants to talk it. Just shit talkers. So, till the next time and such.